What if Torterra was in Gen 1 OU? I just went over Empoleon. It's the middle of the night, but I was in the mood to make another what if video, so might as well finish the Sinnoh trio, don't you think? Now, Torterra. I look at its stabs and I think that's really interesting for Gen 1 underuse, but I'm not super experienced with the tier. But luckily, due to its move pool and stats that are, I'm gonna say good enough-ish. I'll explain what I mean later. But because of the stats in the move pool, along with the very interesting type combination, it definitely has a niche in OU. I don't think that can be denied. Now, let's just get it out of the way. It's super slow, and way more importantly, it has a quadruple weakness to ice. More specifically to blizzard. And yeah, that's gonna be a big hurdle. A really big one, actually, but Torterra can still find merit in the tier. It doesn't have Sleep Powder, but I'm already gonna say that it's better than Venusaur. And I'll even go as far to say that it's probably the best Sword Stance user in the game. That might be a big asterisk, because I think in many ways, Kingler and Sandslash are probably more consistent. But Torterra can definitely make Sword Stance work. It is worth noting that, along with the moves you see here, which I'll go into more detail in a little bit, it also has Amnesia. But just like most grass types, it's not really super usable, and that's because the only two real grass type moves are Razor Leaf and Mega Drain. Mega Drain is low base power, despite the fact that it heals you. So that's not really worth it, and it's the only real special move Torterra has that it doesn't count, because Razor Leaf is a high crit rate. And even with the really big special boost, you're still taking most of your health from any ice move, and Mega Drain will not be enough to heal. It might be enough to, or no, even against like Starmie, I'm sure with just one Amnesia, Starmie can survive that and kill you with a second Blizzard. And if you have max special, well, I just don't see any situation where your opponent lets you get all of those specials in the first place. So that's not worth it. Body Slam is a move I wish I can put, but I think the moves that it already has are just too important for it to get rid of any of them. And Hyper Beam is useless because it hits as hard as Earthquake, where Earthquake is more consistent. Now, what should I go over next? The move pool or the stats? I guess since I already went over some of the moves that you probably shouldn't be using, here's the reason why these 4 moves here are the perfect thing you can be having on your Torterra. Now, Sword Stance, I would say the slower speed is good because it means you don't have to worry about crits, but not really. Even if Torterra was super fast, which would be kind of funny, but even if it was fast, I'd still argue Sword Stance is probably one of the better things you have on it, just because you really need that consistent damage just for some of the things that it struggles against, such as Zapdos. But in general, if you get a Sword Stance off, it is demolishing pretty much everything with Earthquake, and anything that doesn't care about Earthquake is either being hit for super effective damage on Rock Slide, or it's Executor, where a single Sword Stance is enough for you to face it with Rock Slide. And obviously just stab Earthquake with a really high attack, just amazing, you love it so much. And Rock Slide, as usual, is pretty good coverage, you're gonna see later on. But to my surprise, Torterra hits so hard it can actually do a third to Zapdos. And due to your high defenses, it makes it way less one-sided than I would have imagined. Now last, and certainly not least, is Razor Leaf. Having a stat combination of grass and ground is really interesting, and being able to be a mixed attacker also just adds to Torterra's versatility as a late game cleaner. 75 special attack is already higher than Tauros, and Tauros isn't using any special stab. It's using a Blizzard and Thunderbolt, or Fire Blast in some weird cases. And unfortunately, Torterra is not fast enough to always get a crit with Razor Leaf. However, Zashily, I'm pretty sure, did the calculations in my server before making the video. Torterra has a 85% chance to crit with Razor Leaf, so it might as well. And to be honest, you're probably only using Razor Leaf against things that are weak to it, such as Rhydon or Slowbro. Probably not Starmie, because Blizzard hits a little too hard, but if it's Paralyzed, you probably are. And in those cases, the small chance of Torterra not critting isn't a big deal, because not only is it doing super effective damage anyways, but most likely, the opponent is switching out their Grass Weak Pokemon anyways. And you're probably going to get a crit with Razor Leaf, probably going to get decent chip, unless it's like Victory Roll exactly. Or, if it doesn't crit, not a big deal, because that wasn't what you were trying to take out anyways. So I would say it has a really good move pool. Like, I wasn't expecting it. If I'm being honest with you, I was expecting Torterra to just completely suck. Because a slow Pokemon weak to Ice in Gen 1? That doesn't sound very appealing. But the move pool is already pretty good. And as for the stats, even the stats are way better than you expect. Everyone assumes Torterra is the slowest thing around, but that cannot be further from the truth in Gen 1. It is faster than Snorlax, it's faster than Slowbro, which is obviously huge considering it has Razor Leaf. It's faster than Rhydon, which is also huge because, again, you have Razor Leaf. You know what else it's faster than? It's faster than Chansey. You have high attack and a strong physical stab move. And guess what? You're also faster than Executor. Why are you faster than Executor? Executor is base 55 speed. You're base 56. That tiny fact alone, while it doesn't really make it super big, being able to move first and do something in of itself just makes the matchup significantly more fair. Especially if you already have a Sword Stance up. If you have a Sword Stance up already, you flat out probably beat Executor. And even if you don't, worst case scenario, you're getting some Rock Slide chip in before it puts you to sleep. Or in most cases, both of you are doing decent damage to each other. And keep in mind, for Executor, it's not like Chansey or Starmie or even Alakazam. It doesn't have recovery. So any damage Torterra does is probably permanent. Yeah, what the heck? Like, how is even its speed unironically not that bad? Like, it's not one of the faster things around, but I almost feel like you can't put Torterra with the slow ones. And even then, being the fastest of the slow Pokemon? Was anyone expecting this? I certainly wasn't. But I'm really happy. Torterra was my favorite of the Sinnoh starters as a kid. I've always had a huge love and fascination for reptiles. And I always thought having the big tree on him was really cool. So I'm really glad he's doing a lot better here than I would have expected. Now granted, ice moves are still a big problem. But you know what? He has plenty of other great advantages. Being completely immune to Thunder Wave and Thunderbolt is already just great. You love that so much. And even though it's not just a complete Zapdos counter like Rhydon, with it being able to do some damage with Rock Slide, I would say it's not the worst ground type we've gone over. I've gone over a few ground types that have a complete inability to take on Zapdos, meaning that they just completely fail and being a superior ground type to Rhydon. And that probably won't be the case here. I don't think Torterra is going to be better than Rhydon. In fact, I think Torterra is probably going to be an underuse. But I think it does a good enough job for being a good Rhydon replacement if it really wanted to. Because luckily, with high defense and defense, high HP and defense, it's a pretty good physical tank as well. It's part of the reason why Dropek is only a 3-hit KO, which I just expected Zapdos to be completely unwinnable. But good for Torterra. And even with 85 special defense, it's very similar to Garchomp, who has, I think, 102 HP. So the special bulk on both of them is very similar. And Garchomp doesn't get immediately OHKO'd by every ice move imaginable. And it's the same for Torterra. And even having one turn of surviving, you're probably not winning the exchange, but with Razor Wave and Earthquake, you're probably going to do some decent damage. But that's enough of that. I feel like this intro went on longer than it usually does. Let's get right into the replays. Starting off with the boy himself, we got Tauros. Yeah, Blizzard hits really hard. And Earthquake didn't do as much as I was expecting it to do. To be honest, I'm always underestimating how tanky Tauros is on the physical side. But in this case, I don't think it matters that much because it's still a 3-hit KO, it looks like. Or probably might be closer to a 4-hit KO depending on the damage range. And for anyone who's curious on what does more damage, Razor Leaf looks like it did slightly more, but that could also just be the damage range with Earthquake. You're probably better off going for Earthquake solely because it's more accurate, but even then, Tauros just is doing way too much to you. And I know with Mega Garchomp and with Empoleon, I said even though Tauros wins, like the other does so much damage that Tauros can't risk it. But I don't think that's really the case for Torterra here. Not only because if you're using Torterra, you're probably using it as a late game cleaner with a lot of support. More support than Mega Garchomp and Empoleon need. But also, I feel like for Tauros, or I don't know, like I guess technically it would be the same for Mega Garchomp when it comes to like risking a crit from Blizzard. But also Mega Garchomp has Fire Blast to burn Tauros, which is just way more threatening. Even if Torterra gets a crit Earthquake, it's not gonna kill Tauros. So yeah, I think I'm still fine keeping it where I put it, and I don't think I'm gonna put Tauros and could go either way. Next up is Snorlax, and if it's a physical Snorlax, yeah, he is not really doing much to Torterra. It can be one of the few things to paralyze Torterra, sure, but even with Reflectalax, Torterra can handle that easily with the Swords Dance. And a Physical Axe is one of the Pokemon Torterra can afford to get a Swords Dance off. And that's the other thing. Even though Torterra, even though it does really struggle with some common weaknesses such as Ice and Flying, because of just how good it is defensively with the types that it is good against, or with physical attackers, Torterra will find opportunities to go for Swords Dance. And when it does, assuming it hasn't taken any of the chip damage and the opponent isn't using like their best ice type, Torterra can stand up to a good amount of things. And with the Swords Dance, I'm pretty sure it does 2-hit KO everything with either Earthquake or Rock Slide. Obviously, mixed sets with Ice Beam or especially Amnesia are pretty dangerous. But even then, as you see there, Torterra can like either 3-hit or 4-hit KO Snorlax. Granted, a lot of Snorlaxes do have rest, but still, even in the worst case scenario, Torterra being faster means it can get some damage in. And you're faster than Chansey, which is definitely really good, but I was really surprised to see that Earthquake isn't a 2-hit KO. It might be with a good damage range, but yeah, Chansey can survive. But then again, with that much damage, does Chansey really risk it? Not to mention any chip, and Torterra just wins. So it could go either way, I would say. Now Alakazam. Alakazam does about a third with Psychic, but Earthquake is a 2-hit KO. And unlike Alakazam, Torterra can't get paralyzed. So Thunder Wave, like Torterra is just a great Thunder Wave sponge. Alakazam almost always gets paralyzed during games, which means that it's just going to be terrified of Torterra here. It needs a crit or a special drop just to get Torterra low. And even then, you're not going to risk that considering Torterra so easily 2-hit KOs you. So maybe this should be a could go either way, but I'm leaning towards it being more so a good matchup in practice. Not so much in the vacuum, but you know, you do what you gotta do. And here's Cloyster. Obviously, Stab Blizzard was going to absolutely annihilate, but I'm sure some of you are curious to see how much Razor Leaf does. And due to having to absorb body slams and like thunder waves everywhere, sometimes Cloyster will get paralyzed, which means Torterra will be faster. And in those situations, yeah, of course Razor Leaf does a lot of damage. Most of Cloyster's health. But it's still very dangerous, and I'm going to call this a could go either way. I think it's a lot more different than with Alakazam. Because yes, Alakazam also gets paralyzed a lot, but the difference is that Cloyster just has a very, very easy way to OHKO Torterra, and even if Cloyster is paralyzed, there's always that off chance that Razor Wave misses, or Cloyster hasn't taken enough chip damage to where it gets KO'd. So it's very dangerous. There definitely are some situations where you could risk it. For the purpose of the tier list, I'm putting it in unwinnable. Now here's one where I assume the matchup will be unwinnable, but like I said, being faster is surprisingly relevant. Both 3-hit KO each other, and while Torterra will probably lose, at the same time, it can have a Sword Stance up before facing the Executor. And if that's the case, then I'm pretty sure it just wins pretty easily with Rock Slide. Not to mention, at this range, anything can easily revenge kill Executor. Executor does not have rival recovery, so Torterra being able to hit it physically can take advantage of that. Very surprising, but pretty cool, if I say so myself. What isn't cool is this replay, but that's because Torterra just absolutely dominates Gengar. In fact, it dominates Gengar way better than Rhydon does, considering it has higher special. So, yeah, there's not much to say there. Gengar just kinda sucks. Now, Jolteon. This replay really surprised me, because without Reflect, it is able to survive Earthquake? How is that possible? Immediately after finishing this replay, I did a damage calc. Earthquake on Torterra against a Jolteon with max HP and defense, because keep in mind, this is Gen 1, everything has max DVs and EVs. Jolteon takes 93 to 110 damage from Earthquake. So yeah, I wouldn't have expected it to be not be OHKO, but I mean, it doesn't really mean anything, because you saw how much 2 pin missiles did to Torterra. It did jack, but still, it surprised me, and I'm sure it surprised you too. Unlike this, although I will say, if Jinx is paralyzed and has taken some chip, maybe Torterra can take it out, but it's still very risky. And for the purposes of the tier list, obviously we're keeping Jinx in unwinnable. There is absolutely no way around that. But still, I guess you could be super cool one day and win with Torterra. And against Pokemon like Rhydon, you're going to get those instances where you can go for a Sword Stance. And keep in mind, when I make this replay, I forgot Grass resists Ground. So I was just thinking to myself, oh, even a neutral Earthquake, Torterra tanks very easily. And given that Earthquake only did 17%, I guess that's technically still true. But with the ground resistance is makes this even better. And I don't think I talked about that, but resisting ground is also just really big. It really helps you against, like, you know, like pivoting, like physical Snorlax set, as well as other things. It's very good and gives Torterra more chances to set up, which I don't know, I find that neat. Really, really neat. Alright, next off, we have Slowbro. And there's not much Slowbro is really doing here. It can't even Thunder Wave Torterra, so it's just completely useless. Which I'm sure a lot of you are glad, because I think metas for Torterra is here and Slowbro is just less viable. Because I think even if Torterra isn't in OU, I feel like just the fact that it could be here on a team means that Slowbro as a win con just becomes way less common. But who knows? Next off is Starmie, and this surprised me, but Blizzard did in fact get an OHKO. I figured since Chansey had higher special, I think barely higher special, but since it did have higher special and used Ice Beam that Torterra survived, this wouldn't be the case. But I guess Blizzard is stronger than Ice Beam, and I don't think the special between Starmie and Chansey is that different. So I'm sure if Chansey went for Blizzard, it probably would have killed Torterra. So something to consider. Not disappointing, because I was going to say this match becomes really fair once like Starmie is paralyzed. But oh well. But we only have a few more replays left. But we have 3 actually. Because Zapdos, I just feel like this is really worth exploring in multiple ways. Well, here's Victory Bell. I don't have too much to say. Both just hit each other really hard. 3-hit KOing each other. I'm sure if Sword Stance is actually worth it. Probably not. In this case, it really doesn't matter because Torterra would be revenge killed. But both just hit each other pretty hard and 3 KO. Or, not 3 KO, because obviously Torterra survived, but with 1%, I'm pretty sure it's just the damage range. So one of the closest could go either ways ever. I can't even make fun of Victory Bell, it just did a pretty good job there. Now last but not least, we got Zapdos. And like I said, Drill Peck's only a 3-hit KO, and so is Rock Slide. So, obviously Zapdos is going to get way more crits, so it is, at the end of the day, just a bad matchup. But I did want to show how Torterra can do when it has a Sword Stance already up. Also, allow me to vent, because while trying to make these replays, I had Zapdos crit Drill Peck 6 times for 6 different replays, and it was so annoying. And even when making new replays here for like the Sword Stance, Zapdos crit twice in a row, killing Torterra. It was ridiculous. But still, here's what a single Sword Stance does. If anyone curious, if Torterra uses 2 Sword Stance, I believe it goes to 948. So going for a 3rd Sword Stance will always be... it would just not matter. But there we go. For a Pokemon that I think isn't strong enough for OU, I've had a lot of good things to say. I definitely think UU will be Torterra's home. Because in UU, it just completely stomps Electrode, Golem, probably Electabuzz, Haunter, and it is pretty good against the normal types like Persian, and I'm pretty sure Kangaskhan as well. But at the same time, the flying types, as well as the water types minus Amistar, do kind of eat it alive as well. But that just makes Torterra very balanced in the tier, which is good. And it's surprisingly balanced here in Gen 1 OU as well. With a tier list like this, it doesn't really look like it would be underused, but it probably would be. But what do you think? Do you think Torterra might have what it takes to stay in OU? I think probably not. I think like it worked pretty well for those replays, but you also have to work an entire team around it. And keep in mind, if we're playing for meta, you're playing to win. So you're probably just going to use their standard normal and psychic types for good teams, just so that, you know, it's easier and they're more versatile. But still, being the best Sword Stance user is pretty good. And despite Victory Bell being an OU, you could probably make an argument for Torterra being the second best grass type in the game. Which I think that's neat. I don't really know how Infernape's gonna do. I thought it was gonna do good, but I forgot that it's technically slower than Tauros. And it's already a fire fighting type, which is just bad for Gen 1 OU. So I don't know how it's gonna go, but I'm definitely curious. Let me know what you think too. Also be sure to join the Discord server, because I host tournaments based off the what if scenarios that I do, and they're always a lot of fun. I love to have you there. I also have a Patreon if you'd like to support that. You can get your own video, your own what if video, both for Gen 1 or for just any video. Or not any video, any tier, any Pokemon tier. So if you want something like, what if, like I don't know, what if Zygarde was in Gen 2 Ubers? I'll try to do that. But yeah, that's about all. Thank you all for watching. This is Groundback, and I look forward to hearing from you.